Page 142. Dear Diary, after all that throwing, I was starving, and for once was looking forward to getting home and snatching a TV dinner from the freezer, opening the box, poking holes in a plastic cover with a fork, then microwaving that thing into a steamy, weird-smelling meal. Yum. But Daryl had other plans. He ended up taking me to the Chinese restaurant him and my mother went to on their first date, which happened to also be the same Chinese restaurant me and Lou and Ghost and Patty and Coach went to on our first date, back when the season was just getting started and Coach was trying to get us newbies to bond. Back when we shared secrets, when I found out about Patty's mom and Ghost's dad, and how Lou always wanted a brother. Back when I shared my own secret about my mother dying and being forced to run by the man who was now sitting in front of me, flipping through a Chinese food menu the same way he flips through the newspaper on Sundays. When the waiter came over to take our orders, I let mine rip. Peking duck, and a cherry Coke. And before the waiter could say they don't have a cherry Coke, I told him that I knew they didn't have it, so a Coke with a little cherry juice in it was fine. Gerald just shook his head. He ordered sweet and sour chicken and asked me where I learned about Peking duck. I told him Aurelia orders it sometimes for lunch. He nodded and said my mother used to order that too. Said it was one of her favorite dishes, that and sausage biscuits. My cherry Coke came out. I took a sip. It was delicious. Diary, remind me to thank Patty tomorrow. Anyway, that first sip brought up an idea, especially since I don't really know what to talk about to Daryl about. Besides random comments about chopsticks and my mother, things were pretty awkward. Not in a bad way, but in a way that made me keep moving around on my side of the booth, trying to get comfortable on the sweaty vinyl. So I did the only thing I could think of. I asked Daryl to tell me a secret. Then I had to repeat the request. And finally, after saying a secret he told me why he made me call him Daryl and not Dad. He said he didn't feel like he could truly be a dad without my mother, and that it just didn't feel right. Like I'm his son and he's my father, but she would never be able to hear me call her mom. So he just felt like it was unfair for him to be called Dad. So he felt like it was unfair for him to be called Dad. He also admitted that maybe that's not a good reason, but it's the truth. I was supposed to be the biggest return. Hearing Mommy and Daddy was supposed to be the ultimate ROI, return on investment, the greatest moment in their plan. I asked him if he wanted me to call him Dad. He asked me if I wanted to. I told him I didn't think so. Then asked him if that made him sad. He asked me if I hated him. I said, of course not. Then Daryl said, then Daryl is fine. Cool. Now your turn. Tell me a secret, he asked. At first I thought about telling him about you, Diary, about how I still talk to you through writing, and how really that's kind of weird, but I like it. I like you. But then I was like, no, that's not a big deal. Not nearly as big of a secret as me talking to myself, like having full-on conversations. And none of that's as big of a deal as me sometimes climbing into my baby crib, since it's still in my room. But I wasn't ready to talk about that yet. What I really wanted to tell him was something new, something fresh that I had been holding in. I'm scared about tomorrow, about the track meet. That's what I told him. He asked why. I told him I'm used to running the mile and knowing that I will win. And when I do, I know I've made the team proud. I've made my mom proud. I knew I'd be putting the ribbon in his hand. But if for some reason tomorrow I don't do well, then I've let everybody down. Him, the team, my mother, everyone. Daryl set his fork down, his face stoning up in that serious way. He told me that he knows he hasn't been the kind of father that gives advice, but that he was going to give me some now. And then he said that when I step into the circle and I do that weird spin and I let the discus go, don't think about him or the team or even my mother. He told me to let it go for me. Dear Diary, after dinner, we came home, and before going to bed, we stood over the big table in the family room, picking through the pieces left to the puzzle we were working on. The face was complete, and the tricky part was now getting the rest of her body done. But most of it seemed to be blurred, like wind. It was the picture, the one Gramps gave me, from the baby shower. And as Daryl and I tried blurry piece after blurry piece until finally completing most of her torso, We didn't talk too much, just worked together. And when we finally said goodnight, we did this weird hug thing, like we had just grown arms. And before going upstairs, I glanced at the puzzle, at the blur, and I knew I was in there. Chapter 9, Saturday. Dear Diary, I don't have time to say much this morning because it's meet day, and I'm too nervous to write anything except for maybe. I'm so nervous. Wish me luck. Also, I hope Daryl is okay. Today is the day my mother died. Dear Diary, by the time I got downstairs, dressed in my Defender's uniform, ready to go to the meet, Daryl had already made breakfast, pancakes and eggs, but I told him I can't eat. Too nervous. Actually, first I thanked him, then I told him I can't eat because my stomach had been tied in knots all morning, milky glue guts. So for the first time in forever, I turned down pancakes. Daryl said it was okay. Then he said, happy birthday. Happy birthday. Usually my birthday is spent with Aurelia taking me to a dance show or a concert. Always, always, always something experimental that involves face painting and neon lights, which is cool, but I'm not sure how much of it screams, happy birthday, Sonny, but I always appreciated it. It's more than anyone else has usually done, and by anyone else, I mean Daryl. Daryl normally just takes this day off, like off of everything. He usually just sits in his chair and be stoned.